Judge Harlan Voss didn't just preside over the courtroom in Oak Creek, he owned it. For 20 years, he ruled from the bench like a king, turning justice into a vending machine for his own profit. He thought he was untouchable. He thought the law was a weapon only he knew how to wield. But on a humid Tuesday in October, he made the fatal mistake of underestimating the quiet man in the orange jumpsuit standing before him. Harlan Voss thought he was crushing another helpless defendant. He didn't know he was looking into the eyes of the man who had spent 3 years building the cage that was about to snap shut around him. This is the story of how a corrupt tyrant jailed an FBI agent and the terrifying storm that followed. The air conditioning in the Oak Creek County Courthouse had been broken for 3 days, but in courtroom 4B, the heat wasn't coming from the vents. It was radiating from the bench. Judge Harlan Voss sat high above the proceedings, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his robe hiding a bespoke Italian suit that cost more than most of the defendants in his room made in a year. He tapped a gold-plated pen against his docket, a rhythmic tick-tick-tick that sounded like a bomb counting down. To the locals, Voss was a pillar of the community. He attended the fundraisers, shook hands with the mayor, and played golf with the district attorney every Sunday. But in the shadows of Oak Creek, the name Voss whispered of something else. Cash for sentences, bail bondsmen who kicked back 20% to the judge's offshore accounts, and a ruthlessness that destroyed families for sport. Next, Voss drawled, not bothering to look up from his papers. The bailiff, a heavy-set man named Derek Langford, who had long ago traded his conscience for a steady paycheck, shoved a young man toward the podium. "Docket number 4492, the state versus Ronan Hale," Langford grunted. The courtroom was packed. It was always packed. Voss liked an audience. He operated his courtroom like a theater of cruelty. Today, the gallery was filled with worried mothers clutching rosary beads, bored reporters waiting for a sound bite, and the sharks, the private defense attorneys who knew exactly how much to bribe Voss to get a case dismissed. Ronan Hale walked to the podium. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with skin the color of deep mahogany. He wore a faded gray t-shirt and jeans that had seen better days. His hands were cuffed in front of him, but it was his demeanor that shifted the atmosphere in the room. Most men dragged before Voss were shaking, sweating, or shouting their innocence. Hale was absolutely still. His face was a mask of impassive calm. He didn't look at the floor. He didn't look at the gallery. He looked directly at Judge Voss. "Charges?" Voss asked, finally looking down. He adjusted his rimless glasses, his eyes scanning Hale with immediate disdain. In Voss's mind, he had already categorized him: drifter, indigent, nobody. The prosecutor, Lila Monroe, a woman who had climbed the career ladder by never questioning Voss, stood up. She looked tired. "Your Honor, the defendant is charged with vagrancy, resisting arrest without violence, and disturbing the peace. Officer Reynolds reports that the defendant was loitering near the construction site on 5th and Main. When asked to identify himself, he refused. When asked to leave, he stood his ground." Voss scoffed. A wet, ugly sound. "Loitering on 5th and Main. That's near the new commercial development, isn't it?" "Yes, Your Honor," Monroe said. Voss knew that development well. He had a silent stake in the construction company building it. He didn't want riffraff driving down property values before the ribbon cutting. "Mr. Hale," Voss said, his voice dripping with false civility, "do you have counsel?" A young, flustered public defender named Nolan Whitaker jumped up from the side table. "I'm representing him, Your Honor. I just got the file 5 minutes ago." "Enough time for a plea." Voss cut him off. "How does your client plead?" Whitaker looked at Hale, whispering frantically, "Just plead no contest. I can get you time served and a fine. Don't fight him." Hale didn't look at his lawyer. He kept his eyes locked on the judge. He didn't speak. "Mr. Whitaker, your client seems to be mute," Voss smirked, playing to the gallery. A few sycophants in the back row chuckled. "Does he speak English? Does he understand that he's standing in a court of law, not a street corner?" Hale remained silent. This was the first irritation. Voss hated silence. Silence felt like defiance. He leaned forward, the leather of his chair creaking. "Mr. Hale, I asked you a question. How do you plead?" Hale leaned slightly toward the microphone. His voice was deep, steady, and remarkably clear. "I have committed no crime. I was standing on a public sidewalk." The room went quiet. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. No stutter, no "Your Honor," just a statement of fact delivered with the authority of a hammer striking an anvil. Voss's eyes narrowed. The air in the room grew heavy. "You were obstructing a police officer, and now you are testing my patience." "I am waiting for the evidence of obstruction," Hale said. "Excuse me?" Voss drew the words out. "You don't make demands in my courtroom, boy. You answer questions." "I entered a plea," Hale said, his face unreadable. "Not guilty." Voss felt the heat rise in his neck. This was a challenge, a public challenge from a nobody. He couldn't let it slide. He had to crush it right here, right now, to maintain the fear that kept his kingdom running. "Bail is set at $50,000, Voss announced. Gasps rippled through the gallery. For a vagrancy and loitering charge, bail should have been released on recognizance, or at most a few hundred. 50,000 was an insurmountable wall for a drifter. It was a ransom note. "Your Honor," Nolan Whitaker squeaked, finding a backbone somewhere in his cheap suit. "That is excessive. These are misdemeanors. My client has no prior record in this state. He has no ties to the community." Voss barked, slamming his hand on the bench. "He is a flight risk, and given his attitude, he's a danger to the public order. 50,000 cash or surety." Voss looked at Hale, expecting to see the fear finally break through. He wanted to see the shoulders slump. He wanted to see the panic. But Ronan Hale didn't blink. He just nodded once, slowly, as if he were making a mental note. "Remand him to custody." Voss waved his hand dismissively. "Next case." As Bailiff Langford grabbed Hale's arm to yank him away, Hale didn't resist. He turned smoothly, his eyes sweeping the room one last time. For a split second, his gaze landed on a man in the back row wearing a faded baseball cap, a man who gave the slightest, almost imperceptible nod. Voss missed it. He was already looking at his watch, wondering if he could make his tea time. He had no idea that by banging that gavel, he hadn't just sentenced a man to jail. He had just authorized the destruction of his own life. The holding cells in the basement of the Oak Creek courthouse were designed to break spirits. They smelled of bleach, unwashed bodies, and despair. The fluorescent lights buzzed with a headache-inducing frequency, and the walls were painted a peeling institutional green. Ronan Hale was shoved into cell 3. "Make yourself comfortable, celebrity," Bailiff Langford sneered as he uncuffed Hale. "Judge didn't like you much. That usually means you're going to be our guest for a long time." Hale rubbed his wrists. "Does he always set bail that high for misdemeanors?" Langford laughed, a harsh smoker's hack. "He sets bail at whatever number makes sure you don't get out until he wants you out. You pissed him off. Bad move." The heavy iron door slammed shut. Hale turned to inspect his surroundings. There were 3 other men in the cell. An older man curled up on the concrete bench, coughing into his sleeve. A young kid, barely 18, with tattoos on his neck and terror in his eyes. And a middle-aged man with a bruised jaw pacing back and forth. Hale moved to the corner, sat down on the cold floor, and closed his eyes. But he wasn't sleeping. He was replaying the courtroom scene, cataloging every procedural violation. 8th Amendment violation, excessive bail, judicial misconduct, prejudicial language, due process violation, denial of reasonable counsel time. He tapped his finger against his thigh. Tap, tap, tap. In reality, Ronan Hale wasn't a drifter. He was Senior Special Agent Ronan Hale of the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. For 6 months, the Bureau had been trying to nail Harlan Voss. They knew he was dirty. They had the financial records showing the offshore inputs, but they couldn't link the money directly to his rulings. They needed a smoking gun. They needed to prove intent. They needed to see him abuse his power firsthand against a target he thought was helpless. Hale had volunteered to be the bait. The pacing man stopped and looked at Hale. 50 grand, huh? I heard the bailiff. You must have really rattled him. Hale opened his eyes. I just asked for evidence. The man snorted. Evidence in Voss's court? I'm Elias. I'm in here because Voss's brother-in-law wants to buy my auto shop and I wouldn't sell. Suddenly, I'm getting cited for receiving stolen property that I've never seen in my life. Judge set my bail at $100,000. I can't pay it. My shop is going to foreclose next week. Guess who buys it then? Hale's expression remained stoic, but his mind was racing. This was exactly what he needed. Testimonials. Does he do this often? Hale asked quietly. Every week, Elias said, sitting down heavily. See the kid Jax over there? Voss sent his dad to prison for 10 years on a first-time offense because the dad refused to fire a contractor Voss didn't like. Now, Jax got picked up for jaywalking. Judge revoked his probation from a juvenile scuffle years ago. He's just squeezing the family. Hale looked at Jax. The kid was shaking. He told me I was trash, Jax whispered. He said I was born to be in a cage. Hale felt a cold fury rising in his chest. He had worked cartel cases in Mexico and human trafficking rings in Eastern Europe. He had seen evil. But there was something particularly vile about a man who draped himself in the American flag and the robes of justice to destroy the weak. Hale reached into the seam of his jeans. It was a risk, but a calculated one. During the booking process, the local deputies, lazy and overconfident, had patted him down, but hadn't done a strip search. They missed the micro recorder sewn into the waistband of his underwear. He adjusted his position, ensuring the device was active. Tell me everything, Hale said to the room. Start from the beginning. Names, dates, amounts. Elias looked at him skeptically. Why? What's a drifter going to do? Hale looked Elias in the eye. The mask slipped just for a fraction of a second, revealing the predator beneath. I'm not a drifter, Elias, and I'm going to make sure he never hurts you again. For the next 4 hours, the cell turned into a grand jury room. Hale gathered stories of corruption that went deeper than the FBI had imagined. Voss wasn't just fixing cases. He was running a racket. He was using the police as his personal enforcers and the jail as his personal dungeon to extort assets from local business owners. Meanwhile, upstairs in his chambers, Judge Voss was pouring a glass of single malt scotch. He dialed a number on his private burner phone. It's done, Voss said. The drifter's in the hole. He'll rot there for a month until he pleads out. By the way, tell the construction foreman he can move the equipment onto the sidewalk tomorrow. No one will be standing in the way. He hung up, feeling the warm burn of the alcohol. He looked out his window at the town of Oak Creek. It was good to be king. But down in the basement, the drifter was finalizing the timeline of Voss's destruction. Hale's internal clock told him it was 6 p.m., the shift change for the guards. This was the window. The plan was for Hale to stay inside for 24 hours, gather the intel, and then his team would spring him with a federal writ of habeas corpus. But the stories he heard from Elias and Jax changed things. This wasn't just about financial corruption anymore. This was a deprivation of civil rights under color of law. It was a RICO case. Suddenly, the heavy door rattled. Bailiff Langford stepped in, flanked by 2 other deputies. He pointed a baton at Hale. You get up. Judge wants to see you again. Hale stood up slowly. Court is adjourned for the day. Judge Voss is the court. Langford grinned nastily. And he holds night court whenever he feels like it, especially for wise-asses like you. He wants to review your bail conditions. Elias grabbed Hale's arm. Don't go. He does this. He gets you alone in the chamber. No stenographer, no lawyer. He threatens you. Hale gently removed Elias's hand. It's okay. He's going to hurt you, Jax warned. Hale walked to the door, his hands being cuffed behind his back this time. He looked back at the men in the cell. When I come back, Hale said, his voice dropping to a whisper, I won't be in cuffs, and you won't be in this cell. Langford shoved Hale into the hallway. Move it. Stop yapping. As they walked down the long concrete corridor toward the private elevator that led to the judge's chambers, Hale prepared himself. He knew what was coming. Voss wanted to gloat. He wanted to terrify the drifter personally. Hale flexed his wrists. The handcuffs were standard-issue Smith & Wesson Model 100s. He had a shim hidden in his back molar, but he wouldn't need it yet. He needed Voss to say the quiet part out loud. He needed the confession. The elevator chimed. The doors opened to the plush carpet of the judge's private suite. The air smelled of mahogany and expensive cigars. Judge Voss was sitting behind his massive desk. The lights were dimmed. He wasn't wearing his robe now, just the suit. He looked like a mob boss. "Leave us, Derek," Voss commanded. "You sure, Judge?" Langford asked. "He's cuffed and he's a nobody. Get out." Langford left, closing the heavy oak door. Voss stood up and walked around the desk, leaning against the front of it, crossing his arms. He looked Hale up and down. "You know," Voss began, his voice silky, "I usually have a good read on people, but you bother me. You don't smell like fear. Why is that?" Hale stood tall. "Because I have nothing to fear from a criminal." Voss laughed. It was a genuine, hearty laugh. "A criminal? You think I'm the criminal? I am the law. You stupid son of a... I decide what is a crime and what isn't. I can make you disappear in the system for 2 years before you even see a jury. Do you understand that?" "I understand you abuse your power to extort money," Hale said calmly, "like Elias's auto shop." Voss's smile vanished. His face went cold. He stepped closer, invading Hale's personal space. "You've been talking to the losers in the tank. Big mistake. See, now I can't just let you plead out and leave town. Now I have to make sure you never talk again." Voss reached for the phone on his desk. "I'm going to have you transferred to the County Max Unit, General Population." "I'll tell them you're a snitch. You won't last the night." "That sounds like a threat on a federal witness," Hale said. Voss paused, his hand hovering over the phone. "Federal witness? You're a bum off the street." "Am I?" Hale shifted his jaw, bit down on the small shim he had moved from his tooth, and in one fluid motion, so fast Voss barely registered the movement, he twisted his wrists. The handcuffs clicked open. Hale brought his hands around to the front, the cuffs dangling. Voss froze, his eyes bulging. "How did you—" "Judge Harlan Voss," Hale's voice boomed, filling the room with command presence. "I am Senior Special Agent Ronan Hale, FBI." Voss stumbled back, hitting his desk. "Bullshit! You're lying!" Hale reached into his drifter jeans and pulled out a badge wallet he had concealed in a sewn-in lining near his ankle, a spot the lazy deputies had missed. He flipped it open. The gold shield caught the light. "You are currently the subject of a federal investigation into judicial corruption, racketeering, and deprivation of rights," Hale stated, "and you just confessed to conspiracy to commit murder." Voss's face turned ashen white. He looked at the heavy door. He looked at the phone. Panic, raw and animalistic, took over. "Derek!" Voss screamed. "Derek, get in here! Kill him! He's armed!" The door flew open. Bailiff Langford charged in, hand on his gun. Hale didn't flinch. He didn't run. He just smiled. "You might want to look out the window, Judge." The atmosphere in the judge's chambers shattered the moment Bailiff Derek Langford burst through the door. Langford was a large man built like a linebacker gone to seed, and he had his service weapon, a Glock 17, halfway out of its holster. He saw Hale standing free of his cuffs, and his brain short-circuited. He saw the badge in Hale's hand, but instinct and 20 years of following Voss's illegal orders took over. "Drop it!" Langford roared, raising the gun. Judge Voss, huddled behind his desk, screamed, "Shoot him, Derek! He's escaping! He attacked me!" It was a kill box. Hale had less than a second. He didn't drop the badge. He dropped his body weight. As Langford's finger tightened on the trigger, Hale surged forward, closing the 10 feet between them with terrifying speed. He wasn't moving like a vagrant anymore. He was moving like a weapon. Langford fired once. The bullet shattered the expensive mahogany liquor cabinet behind the desk, sending shards of glass and amber liquid raining down on Judge Voss. Before Langford could adjust his aim, Hale was inside his guard. Hale's left hand chopped down on Langford's wrist, forcing the gun barrel toward the floor, while his right elbow drove viciously into Langford's solar plexus. The air left the bailiff's lungs with a wet wheeze. Hale twisted the gun out of Langford's weakening grip, ejected the magazine, and racked the slide to clear the chambered round. The bullet clattered onto the hardwood floor. In one fluid motion, he swept Langford's legs, sending the 250-pound man crashing to the ground. Hale placed a boot on Langford's neck, not enough to crush, but enough to immobilize. "Stay down," Hale commanded. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. "You're dead," Voss sputtered from behind the desk, his face red with a mix of rage and terror. He was frantically punching numbers into his landline. "I'm calling the chief of police. I'm calling the governor. You're a dead man." Hale looked at the judge, his expression bordering on pity. "I told you to look out the window, Harlan." Voss froze, the phone receiver halfway to his ear. From outside, a low thrumming sound began to vibrate the glass. It grew louder, a rhythmic thwop. Then came the sirens. Not one or two, dozens. Voss scrambled to the floor-to-ceiling window behind his desk. He pulled back the heavy velvet curtains. His knees gave out. Below the courthouse square, usually empty at this hour, was a sea of flashing red and blue lights. But these weren't just local Oak Creek police cruisers. There were black SUVs with government plates. There were armored tactical vehicles, and overhead, an FBI helicopter was hovering, its spotlight cutting through the twilight to blast the judge's window with blinding white light. The voice from the helicopter's PA system boomed, shaking the very walls of the chamber. "This is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The courthouse is surrounded. Come out with your hands up." Voss stumbled back, shielding his eyes from the spotlight. No, this isn't possible. I own this town." "You owned a thief," Hale said, keeping his boot on Langford. "The FBI owns the jurisdiction." Suddenly, the heavy oak doors to the chambers exploded inward. A battering ram had made short work of the lock. "Federal agents, get down! Get down!" A tactical team in full body armor swarmed the room, rifles raised, laser sights dancing across the dusty air. They moved with a precision that made the local deputies look like mall cops. "Clear left, clear right, one suspect secured." Leading the team was Special Agent Mira Lang, Hale's partner for the last 5 years. She was sharp, fierce, and had been running the surveillance van for 3 days, listening to every word Voss said. She lowered her weapon when she saw Hale. "You okay, Ronan?" Hale stepped off Langford, who was quickly zip-tied by 2 agents. "I'm fine, but the judge here seems to be having a medical episode." Voss was hyperventilating, clutching his chest, slumped against the bookshelf. "This is a mistake. You can't do this." "Do you know who I am?" "I am Judge Harlan Voss." Lang walked over to him, pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from her vest, and spun Voss around. She didn't use the gentle technique. She slammed him against the bookshelf. "Harlan Voss," she recited, her voice cutting through his panic. "You are under arrest for racketeering, wire fraud, extortion, deprivation of rights under color of law, and conspiracy to commit murder." "Conspiracy?" Voss shrieked. "I never—" "We heard you, Harlan," Lang whispered in his ear as the cuffs clicked tight. "We have audio of you ordering your bailiff to kill a federal agent. That one charge alone is going to bury you." "Get him out of here," Hale said, dusting off his drifter clothes. "And secure the files, everything. I want every docket from the last 10 years boxed up." As the agents hauled a weeping Judge Voss and a groaning bailiff Langford out of the room, Hale walked over to the desk. He picked up the gold-plated pen Voss had used to ruin so many lives. He looked at it for a moment, then dropped it into an evidence bag. "Show's over," Hale muttered. But the show was just beginning. Downstairs, the lobby of the courthouse had turned into a spectacle. Word had spread fast. In a small town like Oak Creek, sirens drew a crowd. People were gathering at the barricades, shopkeepers, parents, people who had been victimized by Voss's court. When the elevator doors opened, the flashbulbs erupted. Voss was marched out not in his robe, but in his wrinkled suit, his hands cuffed behind his back. flanked by 4 federal agents. He tried to keep his head up, tried to look dignified, but the fear in his eyes betrayed him. A silence fell over the crowd. For 20 years, this man had been God. Now, he was just a criminal. Then, from the back of the crowd, a voice shouted, "Rotten hell, Voss!" It broke the dam. The crowd erupted in jeers and shouting, "That's for my brother! Give me my house back! Justice!" Voss flinched as if physically struck. He looked around for an ally, for someone to save him. He saw the mayor standing near the police line. "Franklin," Voss yelled. "Franklin, tell them this is a setup." Mayor Franklin Crow, who had taken plenty of kickbacks from Voss's construction deals, turned his back and walked away, pretending he heard nothing. The rats were already fleeing the ship. Behind Voss, Ronan Hale emerged. He wasn't being marched. He was walking with the stride of a man who had completed his mission. He stopped at the top of the courthouse steps. He saw the faces of the people. He saw the relief. Agent Lang handed him a windbreaker with the bold yellow letters FBI on the back. Hale put it on, covering his dirty gray t-shirt. The transformation was complete. The drifter was gone. The avenging angel remained. The interrogation room at the FBI field office in the state capitol was a stark contrast to Voss's plush chambers. It was cold, soundproof, and smelled of stale coffee. There were no leather chairs here, just a metal table bolted to the floor. Voss had been stewing for 3 hours. He had demanded his lawyer, a high-priced shark named Preston Vale from Chicago, known for getting high-profile politicians off the hook. The door opened. Vale walked in, looking grim. He didn't sit down. "Preston, thank God," Voss exhaled, his hands trembling in his lap. "Get me out of here. This is entrapment. That drifter. He provoked me. The audio is inadmissible. I want bail." Vale placed his briefcase on the table and looked at his client with cold, dead eyes. "Harlan, there is no bail." "What? I'm a judge? Of course there's bail." "Not for a federal RICO case involving attempted murder of a federal agent," Vale said flatly. "I just spoke to the U.S. attorney. They aren't offering a plea deal. I don't need a deal. I need you to fight this." Vale sighed. "Harlan, they raided your house an hour ago. They found the safe in the floorboards of the master closet." Voss's face went slack. The blood drained from his lips. "They have the ledgers, Harlan," Vale whispered. "The second set of books, the payouts from the construction companies, the kickbacks from the private prison facility, the detailed list of bribes you took to dismiss DUI charges for wealthy donors. It's all there in your handwriting." Voss slumped forward, his head hitting the metal table. "It was an insurance policy in case I needed leverage." "Well, now it's your death warrant," Vale said. "I can't represent you." "What?" Voss looked up, tears streaming down his face. "You have to." "I can't," Vale said, turning to the door. "Because my name is in that ledger too, Harlan. I have to go get my own lawyer." Vale walked out, leaving Voss alone in the silence of his own making. Meanwhile, back in Oak Creek, the cleanup was underway. Hale sat in a temporary command center set up in the sheriff's office. The local sheriff, a man named Brock Langford, who had conveniently looked the other way for years, had been relieved of duty and was currently being questioned in Room B. Hale was watching a monitor. It showed the holding cells in the courthouse basement, the same cell where he had spent the afternoon. "Agent Lang," Hale said, "go down there. Process them out." "All of them?" Lang asked. "Everyone held on a Voss bond," Hale said. "The U.S. attorney has granted emergency release pending review of all cases presided over by Voss in the last 5 years. It's a blanket annulment." Hale watched on the screen as Lang and a team of agents entered the cell. He saw Elias, the mechanic, stand up, confused. He saw young Jax cowering in the corner. He turned up the volume on the feed. "Gentlemen," Lang announced to the prisoners, "my name is Agent Lang with the FBI. Judge Voss has been arrested. Your cases are being suspended immediately. You're free to go." Elias looked at the open door, then at Lang. "The drifter, Agent Hale, sends his regards." Lang smiled. "He says to tell you that your auto shop is safe. The foreclosure paperwork has been seized as evidence of fraud. Elias broke down sobbing. He fell to his knees, burying his face in his hands. The relief was so physical, it looked like pain. Jax, the young kid, walked out of the cell tentatively, like a bird realizing the cage door was open. Hale turned off the monitor. He couldn't watch the gratitude. It made the anger burn too hot. He knew for every Elias he saved, there were 10 others Voss had already destroyed over the years. "Sir," a junior agent called out from a desk cluttered with files. "We have a situation with the district attorney, Lila Monroe." "Where is she?" Hale asked. "She's currently in her office shredding documents. We have a team outside, but she's refusing entry, claiming executive privilege." Hale stood up, grabbing his raid jacket. "Executive privilege doesn't cover destruction of evidence. Let's go pay Lila a visit." The drive to the DA's office was short. The town of Oak Creek felt different tonight. People were out on their porches watching the federal convoys go by. The veil of fear had lifted, replaced by a buzzing, nervous energy. When Hale arrived at the DA's office, the hallway was chaotic. Local cops were standing around, unsure whether to protect their boss or help the feds. Hale walked right through them. He kicked the door to Monroe's office open. Lila Monroe was standing over a shredder, feeding stack after stack of paper into it. She looked up, her eyes wild, her hair disheveled. "You can't come in here!" she screamed. "These are sensitive case files!" Hale walked over, unplugged the shredder, and grabbed Monroe's wrist. "Lila Monroe," Hale said calmly, "you're done." "I was just following orders," she shrieked. "Voss made me do it. He said he'd ruin my career if I didn't prosecute the people he wanted." "And you chose your career over their lives?" Hale said coldly. "That makes you worse than him. He did it for money. You did it for a paycheck and a title." He handcuffed her himself. As he walked her out, he saw Nolan Whitaker, the young, terrified public defender who had tried to represent him earlier that day. Whitaker was standing by the water cooler, looking like a deer in headlights. Hale stopped. Monroe was struggling against his grip. "Whitaker," Hale said. The young lawyer jumped. "Yes, sir." "You told me to plead no contest because you were scared of him," Hale said. I didn't know what else to do," Whitaker stammered. "He destroys everyone who fights him." "Not everyone," Hale corrected. "You're the acting district attorney now, Whitaker, until the state sends an interim." Whitaker's jaw dropped. "Me?" "Yeah. Don't make me come back here to arrest you, too." Do the job right. Start by reviewing the files Monroe didn't have time to shred. Hale shoved Monroe forward, leaving Whitaker standing there, realizing that the hierarchy of Oak Creek had just been decapitated, and he was the only one left standing with a conscience. But the network wasn't fully dead yet. Voss's reach went beyond the legal system. There was still the money and the people who had paid it. Back at the command center, Hale was looking at the seized ledger. One name kept popping up. Titan Construction Payoff, $500,000. This was the company building the new development on 5th and Main, the site where Hale had been arrested. "Who owns Titan Construction?" Hale asked the room. Agent Lang typed on her laptop. "It's a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands, but let me trace the IP of the wire transfers." She worked in silence for a minute. Then she gasped. "Ronan, you're not going to believe this. Try me. The IP traces back to a residential address in the Hamptons. It belongs to Senator Victor Langford." Hale's eyes narrowed. Senator Langford, the law and order candidate running for re-election on a platform of tough sentencing and prison reform. The man who had publicly endorsed Judge Voss as a candidate for the federal appeals court. Voss wasn't the king. Hale realized he was just the tax collector. The phone in the command center rang. It was the assistant director of the FBI. Hale picked it up. "Hale." "Ronan." The director's voice was grave. "We just got a call from Senator Langford's office. He's claiming he has no knowledge of Voss's activities and is calling for a full investigation. He's trying to get ahead of the story." "He's in the ledger, sir," Hale said. "We have the money trail." "It's not enough," the director said. "Shell companies are slippery. Langford will claim identity theft or a rogue accountant. Unless Voss flips on him, Langford walks. Hale looked at the monitor showing Voss in the interrogation room. The judge was broken, weeping. A shell of a man. Voss won't flip, Hale said. He's too scared of Langford. Langford has wretch inside the prisons. If Voss talks, he's dead before trial. Then we need something else, the director said. We need to catch Langford with his hand in the cookie jar. Hale hung up. He looked at Lang. Pack your bags, Mira, Hale said, a dark smile forming on his face. Where are we going? The senator is holding a fundraising gala tomorrow night in D.C., Hale said. I think it's time for another performance. I was a pretty convincing drifter. Let's see if I can play a convincing corrupt billionaire. The corruption in Oak Creek was just a symptom. Hale was about to go after the disease. The Grand Dominion Ball was the kind of event where the champagne cost more than a mid-sized sedan, and the air smelled of perfume, old money, and political favors. It was held in the ballroom of the Willard Intercontinental Hotel in D.C., a place where history was written, usually in hushed tones behind velvet ropes. Ronan Hale stood by the ice sculpture, nursing a sparkling water that looked like a gin and tonic. The transformation was absolute. The gray t-shirt and dirt-stained jeans were gone. In their place, Hale wore a bespoke midnight blue tuxedo tailored to hide the Sig Sauer P365 tucked into his waistband at the small of his back. His beard was trimmed to a precise designer stubble. He didn't look like an FBI agent, and he certainly didn't look like a drifter. He looked like money, specifically the kind of money that washes other money. His cover identity for the evening, Ronan Vale, a sovereign wealth consultant from the Cayman Islands. Radio check, he whispered, barely moving his lips. Loud and clear. Agent Mira Lang's voice crackled in his microscopic earpiece. I'm at the east exit. Tactical is in the van 2 blocks out. We can't move until you get the admission. Langford is slippery. If we bust him without a direct link to the Voss bribes, he'll claim he's a victim of fraud. Copy, Hale said. He scanned the room. Senator Victor Langford was holding court near the center of the ballroom. He was a handsome man in his late 50s with a practiced smile and hair that was a little too perfect. He was laughing at a joke made by a defense contractor, his hand resting casually on the shoulder of a young aide. Langford was polling 10 points ahead in the midterms. He was the law and order candidate. His campaign slogans were about cleaning up the streets and zero tolerance. The irony made Hale's stomach turn. Langford wasn't cleaning up the streets. He was monetizing the misery of the poor to fund his re-election. Hale adjusted his cuffs and made his move. He didn't approach Langford directly. That was for amateurs. Instead, he targeted Langford's chief of staff, a nervous, sweating man named Quentin Greer. Greer was the gatekeeper. And according to the seized ledgers from Judge Voss's safe, Greer was the one who signed for the packages. Hale slid up next to Greer at the bar. Rough night, Hale asked smoothly. Greer jumped slightly. Just busy. Do I know you? Hale smiled, a shark-like grin that didn't reach his eyes. No, but we have a mutual friend in Oak Creek, a judge. He's having a bit of a plumbing issue right now. Leakage everywhere. Greer turned pale. He looked around frantically to see if anyone was listening. I don't know what you're talking about. Hale leaned in, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. The Titan construction account. The Cayman transfer. 500,000. The judge is in a cell, Quentin. He's singing. He's talking about the senator. He's talking about you. Greer dropped his glass. It shattered on the marble floor. The sound cut through the ambient chatter for a second, but the band played on. Who are you? Greer hissed. I'm the guy who cleans up the mess, Hale lied. I represent the offshore interests, the people who actually own Titan Construction. They aren't happy that their investment is being exposed by a small-town judge who couldn't keep his mouth shut. I need to speak to the senator now. Greer swallowed hard. He's in the middle of a donor greeting. Tell him the tithe is due, Hale said. He'll know what it means. Greer hurried away, weaving through the crowd like a rat in a maze. Hale watched him whisper into Senator Langford's ear. Langford's smile didn't falter. He was a pro. He nodded once, clapped the donor on the back, and excused himself. He walked toward the private VIP elevators, Greer trailing behind him. Greer pointed back at Hale. Langford's eyes locked onto Hale. There was no fear in them, only cold calculation. He motioned with a single finger for Hale to follow. "Target is on the move," Hale murmured. "Going up to the suite. Be careful, Ronan," Lang warned. "Langford has private security. Ex-Blackwater. They aren't bound by rules of engagement." "Neither am I," Hale thought. He followed them into the elevator. The doors closed, sealing him in with the Senator Greer and two massive bodyguards who looked like they chewed rocks for breakfast. "You have a lot of nerve," Langford said, his voice dropping its public warmth. "Crashing my event? Threatening my staff?" "I don't threaten," Hale said calmly, checking his watch. "I mitigate risk. Voss has been arrested. The FBI has the ledger. Your name is in it, Senator." Langford chuckled. "My name, or a shell company that can be traced to a trust that can be traced to a dead relative. I'm insulated, Mr. Vale." "Was it insulated?" Hale raised an eyebrow. Voss kept audio recording Senator of the phone calls discussing the zoning permits for the construction site, discussing the harsh sentencing for the poor to clear the land, discussing the kickbacks. This was a bluff. Hale didn't have audio of Langford. He only had the money trail. He needed to confirm the existence of the calls. Langford's eye twitched just a fraction. It was the tell. "Voss is a paranoid fool," Langford spat. "I told him never to use phones. If he recorded me, he violated our agreement." "Gotcha," Hale thought. Admission of an agreement. "That's why I'm here," Hale said. "My employers can extract Voss, make the evidence disappear, but it will cost you double the usual tithe." The elevator dinged. The penthouse suite. "We'll discuss this inside," Langford said. "But if you think you can blackmail a sitting United States senator, you're not just a fixer. You're a suicide case." They walked into the suite. It was lavish, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Washington Monument. "Pat him down," Langford ordered the guards. Hale raised his arms. He knew this was coming. The guards found the Sig Sauer immediately. They took it, checking the chamber. "Clean," the guard grunted. "Just the piece." They didn't check the cufflinks. They were custom made by the Bureau's tech division. High-definition audio and video transmitters. "Sit," Langford commanded, pouring himself a bourbon. He didn't offer one to Hale. "So," Langford began, pacing the room. "You want $1 million to silence Voss? How do I know you can do it?" "The feds have him." "The feds have a scared old man," Hale said, sitting relaxed in a leather armchair. "My people have reach inside the prison system. A tragic suicide in a holding cell isn't hard to arrange." "I don't want him dead yet," Langford mused. "He still has assets I need to liquidate." "But the recordings. You say he has tapes of me ordering the clearance of the 5th Street neighborhood?" "Yes," Hale pressed. "Specifically, the order to arrest the residents on vagrancy charges to clear the way for the bulldozers. That's a deprivation of rights, Senator. That's federal prison time." Langford took a sip of his drink. "It was necessary. That neighborhood was a blight. I brought jobs to that town. I brought progress. If a few nobodies had to spend a month in jail to make it happen, that's the price of business. I did Oak Creek a favor. Bingo. Full confession. Justification of the crime. "The price of business," Hale repeated, ensuring the microphone caught it clearly. "And the $500,000 kickback to you? Was that also for the good of the people?" Langford smiled cruelly. "A finder's fee. I'm a public servant, Mr. Vale, but I'm also a man who appreciates gratitude." "We have enough," Lang's voice shouted in Hale's ear. "Move in! Team is breaching the lobby!" Hale started to stand up. "Well, Senator, I think we have a deal." Suddenly, Langford's phone buzzed on the desk, a red, secure line. Langford picked it up. "Yes." He listened for 3 seconds. His face changed. The arrogance vanished, replaced by a look of pure, homicidal rage. He looked at Hale. "I see," Langford said. "Thank you." He hung up the phone slowly. "You're good," Langford said quietly. "Ronan Vale, or should I say, Agent Hale. Hale froze. That was my contact at the DOJ, Langford said. Seems there's a raid happening at my fundraiser, and they identified the wealthy donor who walked in as the FBI agent who took down Voss. The two bodyguards drew their weapons instantly, aiming at Hale's head. Did you really think, Langford sneered, that you could walk into the lion's den without getting bit? The silence in the penthouse was suffocating. Langford placed the red secure phone back on the cradle, his face twisting into a sneer of triumph. You're good, Langford said, his voice dripping with venom. Ronan Vale, or should I say, Senior Special Agent Hale. Hale didn't flinch, though his pulse spiked. Who made the call, Senator? Does it matter? Langford laughed, signaling his two bodyguards. They raised their Glocks, aiming squarely at Hale's chest. My reach goes deeper than your badge. You walked into the lion's den, and now the door is locked. My security team has overridden the elevators. Your backup is currently stuck between the 4th and 5th floors in a metal box. In his earpiece, Hale heard Agent Lang shouting over static. Ronan, we're trapped. They cut the power to the lift. We're trying to pry the doors. Kill him, Langford ordered casually, turning to pour himself another drink. Throw him off the balcony. We'll say a deranged stalker broke in. Hale knew he had less than a second. He grabbed a heavy crystal decanter from the side table and hurled it, not at the guards, but at the master dimmer switch on the wall. Smash. The room plunged into darkness. The guards hesitated, their eyes adjusting. Hale dropped to the floor, rolling toward the nearest man. The guard fired blindly. Blam, blam. Muzzle flashes illuminated the room like a strobe light. Hale swept the man's legs, hearing a satisfying crack as the guard hit the marble floor. Hale twisted the weapon free, headbutted the man into unconsciousness, and rolled behind a heavy leather sofa just as the second guard opened fire. Shoot the floor! Langford screamed from the shadows. He's hiding! Bullets tore into the upholstery. Hale returned fire, 2 precise shots that sent the second guard sprawling, clutching his knee. Hale vaulted over the couch, tackling Senator Langford just as the politician reached for a hidden wall safe. He pinned Langford against the bookshelf, forearm crushing his windpipe. Call them off, Hale roared. You're dead, Langford wheezed, clawing at Hale's face. You can't touch me. Suddenly, the glass doors to the balcony exploded inward with a deafening boom. Smoke filled the room. Figures in black tactical gear rappelled in from the roof. Laser sights cut through the haze. FBI, don't move. It wasn't the team from the elevator. It was the hostage rescue team. Clear. Subject secured. 3 agents pounced on Langford, zip-tying his hands. Agent Lang ran in from the balcony, breathless. We had to bypass the elevators and come from the roof. You okay? Hale stood up, wiping blood from a cut on his forehead. He walked over to Langford, pulling the recording cufflinks from his pocket. The red light was still blinking. It's over, Victor, Hale said. Your confession is recorded. You're done. Langford, now disheveled and frantic, looked up with pure hate. You think you won? You think this ends with me? The call didn't come from a staffer agent. It came from your own headquarters, from the deputy director's office. Hale went cold. The deputy director was his mentor. Liar, Lang spat. Check the logs. Langford sneered as he was dragged away. You didn't just arrest a senator. You started a war with your own boss. Hale looked out at the lights of D.C., realizing the rot went all the way to the top. The raid was over, but the purge was just beginning. Hale and Lang didn't head to the evidence locker. They drove straight to the J. Edgar Hoover building, bypassing security to reach the executive suite on the 7th floor. It was 2 a.m., but Deputy Director Malcolm Reed's office light was still burning. Reed, the man who had mentored Hale for a decade, stood by the window looking out at the city. He didn't look surprised. I heard about the raid, Reed said, his voice weary. Langford is screaming bloody murder. He claims you assaulted him. It's a mess. Ronan Hale tossed the hard drive containing Langford's confession onto the polished mahogany desk. He admitted it, Malcolm. The bribery, the hit on me, and the leak. He said someone inside the bureau warned him. Reed looked at the drive, then at Hale. The mask of the father figure slipped, revealing the cold bureaucrat beneath. Langford controls our budget committee, Ronan. If he goes down, he takes the bureau's funding with him. I tried to warn him to back off, but I couldn't let you destroy the institution. Reed grabbed a heavy industrial-grade magnet from his drawer. An emergency bulk eraser. He slammed it onto the hard drive, scrubbing the data instantly. It's for the greater good, Reed said, breathing heavily. No evidence. Langford resigns for health reasons. You get a promotion. The bureau survives. Hale didn't lunge. He didn't shout. He just smiled. You taught me the most important rule of the field, Malcolm, Hale said softly. 2 is 1 and 1 is none. Hale turned his phone screen around. It displayed a live video call with the Attorney General. That drive was a decoy, Hale revealed. The real audio was uploaded to the cloud the second we left the hotel. You just committed obstruction of justice on a live feed to the DOJ. Reed's face turned ashen white. He slumped into his chair, a king whose castle had just crumbled. The double doors burst open as internal affairs agents swarmed the room, handcuffs glinting under the fluorescent lights. As they dragged the disgraced director away, Agent Lang looked at Hale. So that's it. The judge, the senator, the director, all gone. Hale adjusted his jacket, the weight of the mission finally lifting. The weeds are gone, Mira, but the garden always needs watching. He walked out into the night, the quiet man returning to the shadows, ready for the next time power tried to crush the powerless. Judge Harlan Voss thought power was a shield. He thought his robe made him a god, but he forgot the oldest rule of the universe. The higher you climb on a ladder of lies, the harder the fall when the truth kicks it out from under you. Ronan Hale didn't need to shout to be heard. He didn't need to brag to be strong. He simply let his enemies destroy themselves with their own arrogance. In the end, the quiet nobody was the only one left standing, proving that true justice isn't about who has the loudest voice. It's about who carries the biggest stick. Wow, what a ride. If you felt the satisfaction of that final verdict, hit that like button right now. Let's see if we can get 5,000 likes for justice served. What would you have done if you were in Ronan Hale's shoes? Would you have revealed yourself sooner or waited for the perfect trap? Let me know in the comments below. And if you love stories where the underdog bites back and the corrupt get exactly what they deserve, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. We have a new story coming next week about a crooked landlord who evicts an old lady unaware she's the mother of the city's most feared mob boss. You do not want to miss that one. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you judge.